Hello, I'm Danielle. Welcome to Discover Your Spirit's Voice. Today's guest has been seeing spirit since he was a small child and has since gone on to bring mediumship into mainstream media through a variety of TV appearances and daytime talk shows. He went on to produce a successful miniseries called Living with the Dead. He was co-executive producer of The Ghost Whisperer starring Jennifer Love Hewitt and was also executive producer of The Dead Will Tell. Over this time, he has written countless New York Times bestsellers. We are, of course, talking about James Van Praagh, one of the world's most prominent mediums and psychics of our time. James, welcome to Spirit's Voice. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
James, can we start by discussing soul families and the process we go through to learn and evolve together?
I often tell people for them to understand it because many people think it's so ethereal that it's really hard for them to grasp it. So I try to make it as easy as possible and bring it down to a level of understanding. So I just tell people it's like this. This is our schoolroom, and there are many schoolrooms. Earth is one of many schoolrooms. But this Earth, it's a hard lesson. There are a lot of hard lessons here. Lessons we have here we wouldn't have in other systems, other star systems, other places. And soul families are those beings who have taken the same classes together, many same experiences together, whether it's in this or on this Earth world or other places. And there's a sense of affinity, if you will, a collection, and an understanding, mutual understanding, a group understanding as well. And that becomes a soul family, a soul combination, if you will. And we have to remember that we're not just coming back on this Earth or other places to evolve just individually, but we're really connected to each other. So we're really evolving also as a group. So a soul group, let's say it's our family members. And they're very different family members, as we all know. And there are some that are spiritually very evolved. They have university degrees. Well, there are other members of that family who just finished kindergarten. So it's true that and one affects the other. So if someone's a very evolved soul in that group, they might do something to help the other member of the family to evolve, to understand, to enlighten them. So it is very true that we're all in it together. And people say to me, well, if we're so enlightened, why do we have to come back here? Why wouldn't you move on to another place? And I say to these people, well, listen, if you're very enlightened, if you're an enlightened being, what you want to do, if we're all connected, we're all one energy, which we are, then what you might want to do is come back to a level like the Earth level, and help those who don't understand yet, to help to bring them up to the light, and help them to understand their own light, their own spirituality. So I think there are many people on this planet, as you know, because you're one, a light worker who come back and just on this planet to help other people to understand, to illuminate the darkness for them.
I have to say I really value mediums such as yourself, who are teaching about soul groups and giving a greater perspective of our roles here in the physical.
Well, Danielle, I'm also, and I tell this all the time, I'm really a teacher of the spirit. So I'm a medium, and that is really, I am demonstrating the spirituality, that we are spirit and that there's communication. But for me, and this, I want to speak to myself, because there are many mediums out there who are excellent mediums, but they don't have an understanding of the philosophy behind it necessarily. And I also tell my students, just because someone says they're a medium or they're well known as a medium, doesn't mean they're spiritual. Two very different things. So I said, you just got to look at everything, and what resonates as truth within your soul might not resonate with somebody else, but you really have to resonate truth within your own soul.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And sometimes we just have to step out of those conditioned beliefs to see things from another perspective.
It's really very true, and you got to really give that. You have to gift that to yourself, because so many people tend to live their lives in limitation and fear. And I also teach people, or I don't say I teach people, I say I remind people. I remind people who they truly are, because I do believe that we all are knowing this. We all are very aware. But when we come down to this Earth level and go through that valley of forgetfulness and kind of start with a clean slate, and then we're infused with, yes and no's from parents or society or religions, and there's that fear base, we forget even more so who we are in our power. And I will remind people, I'll say, life is very easy. Life is a series of choices. That's all it is, a series of choices. And you make a choice depending upon love or fear. And that's it. There's nothing in between. So if you're living your life dependent upon what other people think you should be, or who you are, or what's successful, but it's not true to your being, you're not going to be a happy person. But if you make the choices which are true to you out of love, even though it might not make sense to your family, society, whatever, you'll be a very, very happy person because you're living your natural state of beingness, that of love, is what we are. And that's really what it is about.
I guess it's why we're all so transparent these days.
Yeah, it's really important, isn't it, to see that more and more. It's very, very interesting. And I noticed that because a lot of people ask me, there's so much going on in the world, and there's so much this and that violence and upheaval. And I said, well, when you have a lot of light on the planet, also, the light illuminates the darkness. So you'll see more of that darkness. It'll come more to the surface.
Someone once said to me that those souls based in the troubled areas are sacrificing their happiness so that we can grow. What are your views on this?
To a point, and I do believe, I believe to a point, yes, because people ask me about, Nazi Germany, World War II, and about 9/11, and all these things, and why could people do that? And I said, well, I don't know, but I do know the possibilities. And I'm not saying it's this way, but a possibility might be that once you pass out of the physical realms and this limitedness, and you go back to the knowingness of the spirit world, the spirit levels, and you realize there is no death. There's no such thing as death. And it really is like Shakespeare said, the world is our stage, and we're merely players upon it. I think that's very much close to the truth, in that we take on these different roles, these different characters, so that a situation may present itself, and we are giving into that situation. So you play this role, they'll play that role, and because of that, there's a situation. And that situation you learn from. You evolve from how we handle that situation. So maybe I'll take the role on this time as a general. I'm going to kill people, knowing that I have to do that in some way. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. I do know, though. This is very, very interesting because I was asked once. I worked with a past life regressionist just once. I was asked about this, and they said, "Why did you do the work you're doing?" I said, "I don't know why I'm doing the work I'm doing, but I went through this regression, and I didn't believe in it necessarily, which is very interesting because I'm a skeptic." And the funny thing is I'm a skeptic, which means I'm open-minded, and I think that gives me my down-to-earth qualities. But during this regression, I did ask in my mind, the spirit said, why am I doing the work I'm doing? Why would I put myself out there as a spiritual medium, taking a lot of bows and arrows, and skeptics and all this stuff, one of the first ones out there, really, a pioneer there. And why am I doing this at such a global level? Well, so interesting. It came back in my regression, which I expected nothing. And I got myself as a general in many, many wars. I saw myself standing there and I had a uniform, changing over and over again. The only thing that was the same was his mustache, which is so funny. But I knew it was me. And it was so fascinating that in all those lifetimes, I was a general and I was responsible for telling my men to go into that part right there and kill people. So I was responsible for millions of people's lives. Now I've come back in this lifetime to heal millions of people's lives. And I had to do it on a global level to balance out the karma and bring that spiritual awareness. And that, to me, feels true. That feels very, very right. So interesting, isn't it?
Mm. One of the things that I really admire about you, James, is you don't have any limitations to the amount of people you can help. You have no boundaries when it comes to love, and you just continue to help many, many people.
It's funny because you say that. And one of the first thoughts that comes to my head when you say you help many, many people was one of the biggest events I ever did was in Sydney, Australia, where I did the Olympic Stadium, I think it was. I think there were 2,000 or 3,000 people, and I was looking around, I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, how do you do that? And I was like, well, it's up to spirit. It's not up to me. It's up to spirit. And if I worry about it for me, and this is very true of mediumship, and I teach with a lot of students about this, if you're worried about you getting it, then you're going to lose it because that's the ego. And when you have the ego edging God out. You got to go out and be the spirit. You got to go out and let spirit use you and be the vessel. And I often think they're all spirits too. On those stanzas, 2,000, 3,000 people, they're going to be touched by this, whether they don't get a reading, whether I'm just reading one person in the audience over there whose son committed suicide or whatever it might be. The information is going to help all those 2,000 or 3,000 people. And I just got to, on the human side, it might be difficult, but I really understand my mindset is really helping spirit, and it's spiritually evolving. It's opening people up because there's nothing more satisfying than you see an open heart and open mind. It really is incredible how you can change people's lives. So just a vehicle for that. But you have to have courage. You have faith and courage and know that you're not in charge, spirit's in charge. And even as a medium who's done this over 30 years, I have to remind myself, the human part of me, don't worry, it's up to spirit. It's the intelligence of the spirit world is really in control. We're merely the puppets.
I'd like to change direction a little here, if I may, and begin to talk about children in spirit. Many grieving parents worry that their child was scared or in pain or even alone when they pass. Can you discuss who is there to greet them and what do they experience when they return home?
Sure. Um, we being all souls and have really experienced lifetimes, many thousands and thousands of lifetimes. So as souls, we've been through this before. Children are very open because children have really just come from the spirit levels. So their mindset is very much of the spirit in being aware of the thoughts of things. They create things. They don't know limitations. They don't know fear. That's why children, when they talk about the imaginary playmates, many times they're not imaginary playmates. They're their spirit guide, their spirit family. So again, there's an affinity. I do believe that there are no accidents. I believe that coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And I think that everything's in divine timing. And I think as the soul progresses, that a soul doesn't need to live 80, 90, 100 years of experience. That soul, for its evolution, might just need to go through the birth experience. Might just need 10 years of life on this earth in order to evolve to the next step. And a family as a soul group, before they all incarnate into this earth level, they say, you know, Johnny, you're going to pass when you're 12 years old, or you're going to be in a car accident when you're 18 years old. You might take your life at 21. And they agree upon that because that's the experience that soul Johnny needs in order to evolve to the next level. So I don't believe there are accidents. I think that everyone goes when they're meant to go. Now, when I say that, I'm going to caution by saying free will is involved too, whereas if someone comes along and just decides to get drunk and get in the car and drive but drunk and they hit a child, that's a little different because that person's free will has come into this circumstance. So it's a fine line there. But I do believe that, so that I do these predestined, most of it, with the children passing, those souls. And many times I find that children who pass are very old souls. And they tend to come back again quicker. And I find that guides are there, relatives that have passed over are there to greet them. No one ever dies alone, ever. They never die alone. Even if it's an accident, the spirit world are very aware of what's going to happen in the next couple of days, next couple of weeks, and they prepare for that soul. Yeah, even if it seems like an accident or something happened very quickly and rapidly, the spirit world is very aware of it. So you'll have your families that know this soul from lifetimes before or from this lifetime. Many of the guides will come in. And also people should know, and I talk about this in my book, that there are those spirits who pass into the other side who maybe wanted children in the earth life, but they weren't able to have them. And they call them the guardians. So what they do, their mission is to help souls that come over, children, let's say, come over to the side of life and greet them with open arms and open hands and bring them to the next level. And many children will often talk about, and again, this is putting earthly conditions on a spiritual world. So, it's a fine line here. But they often talk about going to schools of knowingness, schools of creativity, developing more of the innate abilities of art or music or intellect, mental capacities. So they will have schools over there that do that, places that they can learn these things. So they will finish up, they will evolve on the other side of life. And there is no such thing as time in that world. So people say, well, they'd be 30 years old, they died when they were 15, but they'd be 30 now. When the spirit comes back, many times they will project into my mind an image of what they look like now, or what they were like when they passed over, what they looked like, how old they were. It all depends upon the spirit. But no one ever dies alone. They're always around.
James, in your book, Growing Up in Heaven, you discuss how spirit communication is not just helping the living grow, but also helps the spirit making the contact. How does it help spirit grow? And can loved ones who may be constantly having mediumship readings become a distraction to the spirit's own continued journey?
As I said earlier, there is a connection. We all share a connection. It's a common fabric. We're all from the same cloth. Okay, so let's just say we're all from the same cloth, and one of the pieces of thread moves on to the side. Yes? So we still have that, but they're missing a little thread. I believe that thoughts are things. I believe the whole part of so much more of us than just this physical body. This is just a small part, very small part, tip of the iceberg of who we truly are. And I think that because in the spiritual dimensions, it's a thought world, it's a thought arena, that they receive our thoughts very clearly, very precisely. So when we have thoughts of grief, upsetment, sadness, they hear that, they feel that. It's very real for them. And often they will say, oh my gosh, Mom, I don't want you to feel bad. I'm okay, I'm alive. I cannot tell you the hundreds of thousands of messages that have come through me over the many years where the child will say, I'm not down at that rock in the ground. I'm not in that urn. I'm right next to you. You know, love is love, and love cannot die. Energy cannot die. It changes form. They say, I'm right with you. Sometimes they'll say, Mom, you did this in the other lifetime, and I had to go early this lifetime to balance it out. It's interesting. So we have to be aware of our thoughts. Our thoughts really do focus on the spirit. So I often say to people, it's like when we're going out on a date, for a dinner date with somebody, and we want to get dressed and ready, but the phone keeps on ringing. It's like, wait a minute, I'm doing this. So you're getting taken off of what you're doing because you're going to answer the phone. Grieving is a natural process. It's a process of life and death. We have to go through it. But we also have to realize that there's a responsibility in that. Your thoughts will affect spirit. Your thoughts affect them very much so. They feel your love. They hear your prayers. They're very much aware. So people just should know that. Regarding going to mediums or psychics on an ongoing basis, I think that could be a detriment. I think that could be a crutch. I think it's one to make initial contact with your loved one and know that they're fine, that they've moved on, that they're around you, that there is no death. That's great. And hopefully that'll help that person to realize, to live their life and to move on, and to look at life and death from a different perspective. But I don't think that it's a good idea to go every week to a medium or a psychic. I don't believe that. I think moderation is the key. And hopefully that if it's the same medium or the same psychic or it's like a therapist, that professional will recognize that that's becoming a crutch and won't let them come to them. Try a different way of doing it. Try meditation. Try journaling yourself. Pay attention to your dreams. And I think that's important that people know that.
And what effect does their dependency then have on the person in spirit?
Yes. The spirit will see that their parents, their friends, whoever, that they're stuck on a certain level, that they're stuck on this level of morose, of grief, of upsetment, and this curtain comes over them. You see this like curtain, this darkness, if you will, because the mind, they're all just shut in to that level, and they're not open to moving, to growing, to expanding, because they're so caught up in that mindset of grief and loss that they don't have time to move and grow. And the spirit is very, very aware of that. Saying, come out of that basement, come out of the darkness. There's more to it. There's more to life. And many times the spirit will say, especially for children, they'll say, honor me by living your life fully. And many times I'll say to the parent, why don't you live your life as though you're living for your child, or do something that your child always wanted to accomplish. Why don't you do that now for them? And the best thing you can do, see, the child dies once, but it seems the parent dies over and over and over again. The parent relives that death over and over and over again. It's bad enough the first time the child goes, but then to do that to the spirit in your mind and repeat it over and over and over again, it's really, it's like, yeah, that's not good. It's like the Bill Murray movie. Remember the Bill Murray movie where he sees things over and over again? Groundhog Day. Over and over. Spirit doesn't want that. The child doesn't want that. They want you to be free of that. They're free of that. So don't do that to yourself. Don't punish yourself like that. And many times over these many years, because I'm an old fart, so many times I've had spirit come back. And when his mother or parent passed over, and then they've come back to somebody, and they would say, why did I do that to myself? Time is so precious, and life is so precious. Why would I waste it? Conditioning over and over and over again. I should have looked within myself and found the power of understanding and realized how incredibly powerful my thoughts and the conditions they create.
Oh, you could only imagine how hard it would be to break that cycle.
Totally. Especially a parent who lives with a child. And I work with organizations who lose children, and it's very difficult. It's probably it's the hardest lesson, I think, this physical earth is to lose a child. I can only imagine, but I mean, working with hundreds of thousands, I say it's a really tough one. Such because you have the hope and the promise and the dreams of that child, from your generation to that generation, and it doesn't happen. So the parent will often think God is punishing them or something happened. We don't see the bigger picture, and it's really, I wish they could just step out of it and see the bigger perspective of it.
James, guilt is something that affects many parents who have lost children. What do you say to people who are constricted by guilt and constantly thinking, if only, or if I hadn't of, or even questioning, do they forgive me?
I wrote a book a couple of years back, called Unfinished Business. And Unfinished Business was a book I did for the spirit world. And they told me they were going to do this book, and they wrote it, not me. I was like, okay. And really, it's a book about no shoulda,'ves, woulda,'ves, or coulda,'ves. So it's really the spirit coming back and saying, live today as if it's your last day. Get rid of the guilt, get rid of the shoulda,'ves and woulda,'ves and coulda,'ves. If tomorrow was your last day of living, how would you live your life? You have to realize that at that time, you did things a certain way, and you have to honor that. Hindsight, of course, 2020 in hindsight, you look back, I shouldn't have done that. I've had so many experiences where a child would come through, let's say, died in a car accident, and the parent would say, if only I didn't give them the keys to the car. Well, they would have gotten the keys to the car. They would have gotten them in your purse or on the wall, whatever. They would have gotten those keys. You really can't do that. Oh, it's always shoulda, woulda, coulda. Don't do that. Live your life today as though it's your last day. And you won't have any shoulda, woulda, or coulda. Be very proud of the day you're living and the life you're living right now from day to day. That's the best way I can say that. And forgive yourself. Forgiveness is a big, important part. Remember that you're a soul who's learning. And guilt is a very important lesson in that evolvement. And so we have to go through those things in order to have a better comprehension, understanding, and clarity.
Why do spirit children continue to age and grow whilst adults appear to stay at their favourite age?
Why do they age and adults don't? Well, it seems, again, we're placing physical three-dimensional laws and descriptions in a spiritual dimension. So, again, it's hard and it's limiting. I will say that most souls go to the prime of their life. So let's say a soul here dies 70, 80, 90 years of age. They tend to go back in the time of their life in the physical earth that they would have loved about themselves. 30, 32, 28, 40. It seems that's where they go, the prime of their life. And it seems that a soul of a child that passes, they tend to grow up into that time. They tend to grow up into the 35s, or, again, physical descriptions. But they tend to go to the prime of their life, the most optimum time of their life.
Losing a child is one of the hardest things for the families left behind, who are often left questioning why their child had to die so young. Can you offer any explanation as to why spirit would plan to experience such a small portion of a full life?
I worked with a Compassion Friends, an organization that the parents lose children, and I did this in here recently. I just did it, just wanted to help them, and because they were having some meeting here, and I remember sitting in this room, about 30 people, and I went to this one lady and I said, there's a girl here, she's 15 years old, and she's your daughter who passed. And she said, yeah. And I said, but she keeps on showing me baby clothes. I'm seeing baby books and baby shoes and baby clothes, and all she was able to give me, this 15-year-old, was about baby stuff, baby clothes in the closet, and the woman finally said to me, oh, she died as a baby. She'd be 15 right now. So that's how the spirit would project to me, 15, and showed me all the baby clothes, because that's what it could relate to, because the mother doesn't know anything outside of that soul just being the baby. Does that make sense? I also had an experience at that same night, which is astounding, because I'd never had this in many years of doing this work, where the spirit of a boy came through, and I think he was about, let's say a bit older, maybe 18, around there. And I kept on saying, this lady, about an 18-year-old boy, and you think about him all the time, and blah, blah, and I couldn't get really a grasp of some physical things, but I did get a sense of what he looked like. I'm very able to, it looked like his father, and he was describing him. It looked like, she goes, that's his father, you're describing him. Details like the name, but it was so interesting. So at the end I said, did that make sense? She said, yes, he would be about 18, 19 now. I said, well, when he died, she goes, oh, it was a miscarriage. It was miscarriage. So isn't that interesting? And that she'd been to other psychics or other mediums, and I think it was psychics she'd been to, and they mentioned that there was someone in the spirit with that, with miscarriage or something. So it was, validated from before with their messages. But very interesting how that happens. So that's rare, but that happened.
And what about abortions, stillborns and miscarriages? What happens to the spirits affected by these circumstances?
Oh, well, the thing is, this is really interesting. The thing is she's in this Compassionate Friends group because of that miscarriage. She didn't lose a physical baby. There was never a baby that was born and she lost it. She lost that miscarriage. She's been carrying that guilt around all these years, at least 18, 20 years, about a miscarriage. Now, miscarriage to me is nature's way, God's way of perfecting the female body, that relationship with the incoming spirit, if you will. It's nature's way. It's not up to the mother about that. I think also, so that's really interesting, the miscarriages. It's nature's way of purification. And abortion is interesting. I wrote about this in my first book. Abortion, to me, from my experience, is a lesson with the mother. That the soul of the baby and the soul of the mother agreed upon in the spirit that the mother's going to go through this lesson of abortion. The soul can never be harmed. So the soul isn't even in the body. It's never harmed. But if the mother in her mindset it'll be a lesson of self-worth for her. So that was interesting.
How soon after passing can our loved ones visit us?
Very quickly, in that I believe that everybody visits their own funerals and memorial services. I believe they go there and they see their bodies laid out. They're laid out. I know for sure my father did. We're commenting on how he looked, how good he looked in the coffin. How many people do that? Oh, he looks so much better now. It's such a crazy thing when they're standing right there watching you and hearing your thoughts. And about a half hour later, we're talking to people, and my father came behind me and he said, "Thanks for putting my teeth in. I look pretty good, don't I?" So it was pretty hysterical. So everybody visits their memorial services or funerals. It seems that, when you step into that spiritual dimension, there is no time. They're outside of time. So again, laws that apply here don't necessarily apply in that dimension. But I will tell you from my understanding that they will come back and visit their memorial service and funerals. And then if they need some rest, it seems, the rest to get back the energy, the prana of life, they have what they we see them hospitals in the spirit world, like hospitals here, but much more open. And it seems that they are there and there's a state of relaxation, of sleep, of just rest, if you will. And it seems that that's for people whose lives have been, whose energy has been drained before they pass. For instance, a cancer, they can drain the body. Debilitating disease that has drained the body. It seems that they need some time to acclimate themselves and raise up that energy, bring it back into a sense of oneness and completionist of their soul. It seems that there needs to be that respite of time. So it's dependent upon each individual soul experience of death. So someone who has a heart attack, be like that, and they'll come back right away. Someone who had cancer for a while might find it takes a little bit more energy to come back here. Remember, one of the first things that happens when they come down to this vibration is that they will pick up the last memories of this vibration. And for most people, it's their death condition. So, great Aunt Helen, who passed of bad cancer, might come back and she's like, "Oh, I don't want those conditions again." Oh, and it might seem very, very real to her, but it's really just a memory. So we're going to keep saying, it's a memory. And as a medium, many times I'll say to them, it's just a memory. It's not real. It is not real. It's just a memory you have of this level. So it's again, individual souls. Each soul has experience of death, and it's up to each soul how they're going to come back, when they're going to come back. I just said there's usually a rest time. Now, I remember about 25 years ago, I was doing a reading in my house, my apartment, and I remember this gentleman came through. This was Saturday night, and this gentleman came through, and he was working with this other man that was his partner. I said, "He's telling me his name is Luke." "Yes." I said, "He tells me that you were just looking at the footpath with the lights on the footpath. You opened it." He goes, "Yes, we did that. We put those lights on the footpath just last week." He died on Thursday, and this was Saturday, 2 days later. So they're right there. They're right there.
Many of your readings show that spirit children go to school and continue to learn once they pass. How do they spend their time, and what sort of lessons do they participate in?
So I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Remember that within us, within each one of us, we develop a kindredness to a certain subject matter, a certain liking things, not liking, dislike of things. So your soul is really, there's an affinity to things, whether it's music, whether it's sciences, whether it's history. And again, it's the soul makeup. It's a soul makeup. So the soul, and that's based upon soul's experiences of lifetimes, eons of time, of where they've placed themselves, they've challenged themselves, the interests that they have, the behaviors that they've had, the lifetimes that they've had, things that they find interesting, curious, helps them to grow, understand things a different way. So why should that stop when you die? You just continue on at higher levels of learning. So philosophy. Well, the philosophy is a fabulous one because in the spirit world, you have great teachers of philosophy. Socrates is over there, and there's wonderful teachers over there. You get to the main people. So there, if you will, again, I don't like saying this because it limits it. Because again, we have this three-dimensional physical thing placing on that dimension, and it feels just so limited here. So I do know that there are great halls of learning and knowledge and understanding. I know there are places that souls go back to and they reflect upon the lives they've lived and how they want to live in the future, and how they're very, very much aware of how their lives have affected other people and their influence to other people, of the actions they've created or the thoughts they've had, how in turn that's affected somebody else's life. And they realize that love is the only answer. Love is the one uniting force. And they have to love what they do. So if someone loves music, they're going to go to learn more about music, create some more things, create music in the world. So in the spirit levels, because there's no time, you really do what your soul loves. If on the earth you want to play the piano, but you never had the money or the time or the abilities, in the spirit world, you're able to play the piano if you choose to. You do whatever your heart desires in spirit. That's why it's called heaven. So you tend to learn and evolve as over there as well in different ways. It seems this earth level, the challenges are here. And the reason I say that to you is because, like people say, well, why would I come back on the earth? Because, if everything's great over there, well, why not? I do believe that when we pass over, we go to that level which we've created based upon our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. So in the Bible, it says, my Father has a house of many mansions. What I believe that to mean are the various levels which exist. And you will go to that level with your mindset of what you've created. If you're a born-again Christian or Islamic or whatever your religious belief system, you'll go to that level where there are other people in the same level as yourself. Forgive me, I'll let that ring. So there are other people in the same level as yourself, and there are levels that are below you and levels that are above you. Many be unevolved or evolved. So you go to that affinity, that level that you created with your thoughts, words, and deeds. One more. Okay. So I think that people come back on this earth level. We're here with people of all different levels of spiritual evolution, soul evolution. There are those who are very unevolved, nursery school to the, like I said earlier, masters of university. So we're thrown down here with people of all different understandings, levels of involvement, and so forth. What does that do? Well, because of that situation, when you have all of these players here of all different levels of understanding, it creates situations. Who is correct? Who's not correct? One person will express this way, another person expresses that way. And we really have to find the best within ourselves, and it pushes us to evolve and to grow and to start looking at things from a different perspective, perhaps. So it gives us opportunities, and these opportunities create growth and evolvement, hopefully. So that's why we have this earth level.
So can we ever have that perfect world?
I think we can if we have an understanding of each other. And I think if we I do believe that love is it. If we use love in every action, I think we'll create that perfect world. Okay, I think like I said earlier, there are many, many places to go to. There are many different places of life, different forms of life, whether it's vapor, whether it's light, whether it's just physical. They're all different these levels. And I think that the earth world is really an unevolved level. And they talk about that. Spirit will say you're kind of on the low rung of the ladder of spirituality because you still do not have the understanding of love. You're still killing each other when there's no death. You'll never find that. You have to find love. Love is the only force that there is. And the further you go away from that, the less evolved you'll be. It's so funny because wartime, people talk about war. I've been through many, many soldiers. And many soldiers said, well, that was my soul pattern. And that many lifetimes I felt I had to have the courage. I had to stand up for my rights, my country's rights. And that was my belief system, a lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, until I realized now that it doesn't really matter. You really have to understand somebody else. They're not foreign. We're all connected. There is no difference in countries and color and all that. It isn't. We're all just one. But that soldier to go through those to understand that, perhaps. So it's very interesting. So until we have that understanding of love on this planet, we're going to go back and forth through, recycling and reincarnations and so forth until we bring ourselves to love. But then there are those beings, the souls, like I said earlier, who are very evolved, who come back to teach that, to bring the light to those others, to illuminate them, their mind, open up their minds.
So in a way, our evolution is diminishing our egos and we're expanding as one.
Yeah, we help each other out. It's right, exactly, because we're all in it together. We're all in it together. I had a near-death experience about 5 years ago. I talked about this in one of my books, where I was I left my body. I was had food poisoning, and my head hit the sink in the bathroom. And I went flying out of my body, and I looked at it, a curse word, and immediately had an understanding, a total different perspective. I was outside of time, completely out of time, and the awareness that I had immediately was that there's like this tapestry above this world, and that each person is like I said earlier, a thread to that tapestry, and that person's thoughts will create the color of that thread, and in turn influence that tapestry. So if they have love and understanding and help, maybe these beautiful purples and pinks and pastel colors that will influence that tapestry. And I realized that if someone had bad thoughts, mean thoughts, greed, it gets very murky and gray and dark colors, and that influences the tapestry too. And I realized in that second moments that we're all connected, that we're all part of that tapestry, and that we do influences everybody else. I realized that right away. So it's a very interesting one.
Many parents are worried that their child may reincarnate before they themselves pass. Does this ever happen?
So many people ask that question. They say, well, if we reincarnate, how can we see them when we pass over? Well, it goes into this, in a sense, that we are much, much more than this physical body. As souls, this is just a little part of who we are, okay? So I'm going to repeat myself, but it's important that if we could just think that, once again, the soul is a big star, and that this is just one point, this physical body is one point of that star. And that personality, really people relating to this recent personality of this lifetime. When we go back to the spirit world, we go back to the wholeness of our beingness. So you as a soul will recognize that other soul and their whole makeup, yeah? So you never die alone, and those connected with you, especially in this recent lifetime, you'll tend to come back in the physical again on the same go-around. So there's no way that you will not see them again. Now, there's an aspect of that soul that might come back into another time, but I also tell people right now, as you're looking at me, if we're talking, there's a part of your soul which could be in China, which could be in Turkey, which could be in New York, all at the same time right now. But you're just aware of this one narrow part of who your being is. This is just one small part of you. So we live on many levels all at the same time. But the most important thing to remember is you will meet up again with them. They'll come to greet you. That's all they have to know.
Can you talk about the process someone who passes through suicide goes through?
So I believe that there's a time to be born and a time to pass. I think that this is our schoolroom down here. And I know as a soul, it's really not good to cut school. And I think same thing with our lives. I think that these lives we have are opportunities, are golden opportunities for a soul's growth. And really, the hardest experiences we have in life, the hardest people we have to deal with in life, are really our greatest teachers. Okay? Because they're obviously bringing something up in you that has to be healed, that has to be realized, that has to be brought into wholeness of being. So they are actually opportunities. Now, it's not an easy answer because there are many different situations. For instance, a soul could have had many lifetimes, and in those lifetimes in the past, they could have found that, you know what, something's not working out, I'm just going to kill myself, and they killed themselves. And there's a soul memory that killed themselves. And then they go to the side of life, and they have a life review, and they realize, I should not have done that. That was really an opportunity. I do believe that that soul will choose to come back and will actually put together situations which very much mimic the lifetime before to see how they're going to handle it this time around. Are they going to go back to the old pattern of suicide, letting go easy? Or are they going to have fortitude and try to fight it and see another way and try to go through it? So I think that happens a lot. I also believe, in my own theory is, the spirits have told me this, but inside me, I've always thought, like, in certain ages in our lifetime, when we have major things happen, so 32, let's say, or 25, or 32, or 56, that we have some kind of aches or heavy-duty sickness, or something comes up, I wouldn't be a bit surprised in other lifetimes that's when we had our departure points. Isn't that interesting? So let's say in a lifetime we got killed at 28 by a car or something, and maybe we're 28 in this lifetime, something happens, my leg is really bad. Maybe in that other lifetime you got hit in the leg. I don't know, it's just my own way of thinking, because it's a soul memory, if you will. So that's something there. There are always guides, teachers, loved ones whose job it is on the other side of life to help those souls over, especially those who find it within their mind that there's depression, or there's a condition that's set up, that they feel the only way out is to kill themselves, to leave this environment. Suicides are very different because there are different types of suicides. So, for instance, if someone just kills themselves because their stock in Google went down, that's a lot different than someone who has a brain disorder. And handled very differently. It always seems from the spirit that it's always the motivation behind the act. What's the reason for it to happen? So it seems to be that. There is no hell. There is no such thing as fire and brimstone. It does not exist. That's man's creation. It does seem that when the soul passes that way, there is a time of reflection, a time of complete love, an unconditional love. And it seems that, and it's from also personal experience that I've had from many, many readings, and family members of mine that have left that way, completed suicide, that it seems that there's an immediate sense of, oh my goodness, what have I done to my family? What have I left behind for them? I've created an environment of grief. I created an environment of guilt. All of these things, and they realize they shouldn't have done that. So, and no one can really pull you out of that. They can help you, but you have to pull yourself out of it in many ways. Just like on this earth, if you're depressed or down, you got to find the strength in yourself to pull yourself out of it. I think you go to as many therapists as you can, and people give you insights of things, but it's up to you yourself to make that choice, make the decision. And I think, again, Danielle, it's soul growth, it's soul evolution. It's realizing that, oh wait, this is not the way out. I've got to learn these lessons. There isn't an easy way out. That being said, in the spirit side of life, there's always love. There's always understanding. There's always a wonderful sense of, it's okay, you'll do it again next time. Just see how wonderful and powerful and loving you are as a soul being. So there's all that. It's many facets, you see, many different facets. But there is no punishment. There's like, you're going to be thrown to hell. Never. Does not happen. A soul can never be harmed. Can never be harmed. It's just the conditions they leave behind. A few things that I believe in the Catholic Church, and I was raised Catholic, and I do believe that they have this one right, where they say prayers will affect the dead. And I do believe that. I think one of the best things we can do for suicide beings are sending them love, sending them prayers of love. Because when that suicide soul gets to the side and they have a hard time believing what they did and the conditions they left behind, if they receive love from us, they have our thoughts of love, it'll help them to heal themselves. If they realize, oh my gosh, they love me so much, it'll help them to love themselves as well.
Is suicide ever a preordained exit, or is it always a choice of the spirit?
Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. So sometimes that soul, they might have set that up before they came back in its lifetime, saying, I'm going to let myself go at 32. I'm going to kill myself. And that's going to be a lesson to all of my family, my soul group, how they deal with that. So that's a lesson we're learning as a soul group. So I can tell you that it could be that way. I don't think there are many absolutes. So that is a possibility for sure.
Thank you, James. If you're interested in finding out more about death and spirit communication, James has a fabulous community offering spiritual advice and inspiration at www.vanpraagh.com. Here you'll find all of James's books and CDs, and of course details of his up-and-coming events, workshops and online courses. Not only does James regularly connect with his members through his online chat room, but he also offers daily inspiration through Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and Pinterest, so be sure to connect with him. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Discover Your Spirit's Voice. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time as we interview the world's most inspiring speakers, philosophers, and spiritual educators of our time, right here on Spirit's Voice.
Join America's own James Van Praagh and Mavis Patilla direct from the UK for an 11-day spiritual retreat aboard a luxury Australian cruise. Learn from two of the world's leading mediums whilst relaxing in paradise. Book now.